we get to the meat and the potatoes of tonight's show, and that is our special guest who is going to be joining us real shortly. And our special guest, which I'm so excited to introduce to y'all, and it's been a while since we had At the Plate here on Empire State of Baseball, first for season 3 here in 2024. Our guest went undrafted, but signed with the New York Yankees, a team he would make his debut with in June of 1990. His 11-year Major League career, this Ohio native would play 9 of his seasons with the Yankees, amassing a .263 batting average, a .772 OPS, and 58 home runs in the Bronx. But it was his at-bat of Game 4 of the 1996 World Series with the team down 2-1 in the best of 7, where he would hit a game-tying 3-run home run, which would shift the series for New York, ultimately winning his first of 2 World Series championships with his follow-up in 1999. After his playing days came to an end, our guest would go on to become an author of his autobiography, a podcast host, and a motivational speaker. And boy, am I motivated to introduce our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, number 13, now batting, Jim Leyritz. Jim, what's going on?
What's happening, guys? How y'all doing tonight?
Good to talk
to have you, Jim.
Move over there a little bit so I'm in the middle. There we go.
No, all good, Jim. Well, first of all, welcome to Empire State of Baseball. We thank you so much for joining us here. And it was fun, when we were in preparation to have you on for this, and we've been talking about this for close to a month now here on ESP. It's just fun to look back at this 90s team and what you were a part of and the moment that we're definitely going to get into. But I want to talk about today's game with you, Jim. It's been 24 years since you last played in Major League Baseball. So it's safe to say this game has changed all the way here in 2024. What are your thoughts on today's state of Major League Baseball?
Hey, listen, it's a different game. I'm not one of those guys that say, oh, the old school was the best way, that type of thing. I do kind of miss that kind of baseball, and it's a little bit tougher to watch these days. But you watch guys like George Brett, there's certain guys that have put some videos out there lately that talk about why are they making all these different new ways to hit a baseball. The bottom line, you square the baseball up with a round bat, you hit the round ball, and you just try to put it in play somewhere where there's not a guy playing. Some of the new rules, the bigger bases, okay, if that's what you really want to try to save injuries, it's not working. If you want to maybe get guys to steal more bags because they can get to the bag easier and to make the game a little bit more fun to watch for the younger kids, okay, great. But a pitch clock in baseball, I always say this. I made a joke the other day on another show. I go, you know what the problem is? Football has a clock. Hockey has a clock. Basketball has a clock. It all gives the fans hope that it's going to end. There is no clock in baseball. So now all of a sudden we're going to give them something that says, okay, the game's going to end eventually. But really what they're doing is they're taking all of the strategy, all of the thinking, all of the gamesmanship about the way the game was played, and they're taking it out. You have guys that don't even look at the third base coach in an at-bat, which is unheard of. That's where all the strategy took place. You went over signs in spring training just to be able to figure out, your third base coach's signs. I think it's even worse at the college level, because the college level, the catcher's not even thinking. The catcher's not calling the pitch. It's coming from the bench. They look at their watches and they throw a pitch. They don't teach these kids anything. Mm-hmm. And, that's the part to me that I just can't. I can't get my. I think sabermetrics is good for the game. I think it's good that we've made some changes, but at the same time, I think they've gone a little bit too far.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there too. And it actually is a perfect segue to one of the questions I had too, just from your time playing the game of baseball to where we are today and the different changes that we've had over the years. We've spoke a lot with fans about what rule changes we might like or what we don't like. But from your standpoint, having played the game professionally, what is one change that maybe you do like since the time you've played? I know a lot that maybe we don't. Like you said, pitch clock, perfect example. But what's the one change you think you might have liked if it took place during your time playing baseball?
Well, listen, I think the pitch clock, if you go to 30 seconds, mm-hmm. That's legit, because then you don't have guys right now are just using it. They step out, they still get that extra 15 seconds. So just make it 30 seconds. Give some time for strategy going in the game. I don't mind maybe speeding it up a little bit because, it did take long. But I don't like the fact that when I get up from my seat to go use the bathroom that I miss 2 innings.
I know
because,
that part's crazy.
Yeah. I go to the game with 4 little kids and they want hamburgers and hot dogs and ice cream. And I say, guys, I'd like to go get it for you, but it takes too long. So you lose concessions. I mean, there's so many things that they should factor into whether or not this is smart. The rule change that I do like. Oh, you know what? I don't know if I like any of them. I don't like the fact the catcher can't block the plate. I think that should be determined by the catcher.
Yeah.
If I want to take a beating, I take a beating.
Block risk.
In second base,
second base, same thing. I agree with you. Can't be Hal McRae and go take out Willie Randolph halfway in the left field. Yeah. But sliding into the bag and taking somebody out, that still should be allowed. It's just I think probably the one rule change maybe I do like is that you have to pitch the 3 batters.
Okay.
Yep.
You have to have a reliever that pitches the 3 batters. And I know Tony Fossis and some of those lefties back in the day that only pitched to 1 hitter to get a lefty out wouldn't like that. It wouldn't have extended their careers quite as much. But I do think having a pitcher that can get 3 guys out, I think that's a fair rule. And if you can still be strategic to that. But I do think the one thing, guys, if I was to change anything, because I actually feel bad for the umpires because they've gotten so bad, is that when I was a catcher, when I caught a pitch, let me get my hand to there. When I caught a pitch, if I moved it towards the strike zone, the umpire would say, Jimmy, you do that again. I don't care if it's a strike. I'm not calling it a strike.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me learn how to frame a pitch, how to make sure that I knew how to frame it without having to move the glove. What they've done to create a statistic, an art to framing a pitch, turning a ball into a strike, I think has really destroyed any consistency that these umpires can possibly have. And the umpires have a union. And I am shocked that they haven't gone to Major League Baseball and say, guys, from now on, if the catcher's mitt moves, we're not calling anything. And I think that would really help both benefit the pitchers because they'll get more strikes, or also benefit the hitter because all these balls that are low in the strike zone that are coming up are called strikes. I think it would be more consistent if they went back to that kind of rule that said, hey, you can't move the catcher's mitt more than an inch, not 2 feet, So that's my take on that.
There's a chat that agrees with you here. Mike Parzial here in our chat. If it wasn't Posey, if it was Joe Schmo that got hurt, there probably isn't a rule made at that point. Yeah, and it's a good point. Obviously look at the catcher who got hurt in the scenario when I believe it was Scott Cousins from the Marlins collided with Buster Posey, a young and up and coming superstar in the game of baseball. In my opinion, I think he's a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. He goes down with that injury. Yeah, the rule changes the next season. I don't know if that happens to a lesser known catcher there. So yeah, I do agree.
I can tell you one thing. In 1990, when Jim Leyritz got taken out at the plate by Kirby Puckett, and he put me almost in my other dugout, there was no rule change.
Nope. Because you haven't hit the big home runs yet. You hit those legendary home runs. That happens in 97. There's a different story. So, listen, Jim, with the art of catching and everything that's gone on, another big thing that's been brought up is the catcher with the knee on the ground, and now they're more in a sit-in position. There's been a lot of criticism from old school baseball players that say you can't properly block balls in the plate, but it helps with your pitch framing. When you were a catcher, did you ever use that kind of stance? Was it a limited thing where you knew it was nobody on and there was a ball coming in the dirt? What do you see from catchers now that you think that would be an advantage and yet would be a disadvantage for a catcher as they're playing their games every single day?
Well, it was interesting because there was a guy when I played named Tony Pena who created this one knee situation. And the reason why he said he did it is because he got into a lower position in the strike zone to be able to get the pitcher a lower target. Well, these guys nowadays, the pitcher's not even looking at the target because no one's given one.
Right.
There is no target given anymore. There's no more moving to one side of the plate or the other side of the plate. There's no more moving up on a breaking ball or moving back on a fastball. There's none of that's taking place anymore. For me, I don't mind if you want to save a catcher's knees to going down on one knee and catching with nobody on base. But as soon as somebody gets on base, you cannot tell me that coming from a one knee position is going to be quicker. It's quicker on a perfect strike, on a perfect pitch to throw down to second base from your knees, but it's not perfect on a ball that's to your right or to your left, and you have to scramble to get up. That's where the sabermetric people don't, oh, that's not a pitch you would have thrown somebody out on anyhow. Well, that's bullshit. You know what? You would have thrown somebody out on that pitch if you were sitting on your haunches. You could get to the pitch. So for me, I think, listen, if you want to do it with nobody on base, that's fine. Save your knees a little bit. But when somebody gets on base, you got to be in a ready position to be able to get to any ball to be able to throw to the bases.
Tony Pena was in like a yoga pose in there. He had the leg out and everything. I remember when he was the Yankee first base coach for a little while, and I forget who was there at the time, and I feel like there was a little of experimenting with it, and they would show Pena, and he wasn't just like the knee down guy. He was like leg out. Yeah. It was
but again, he only did it
painful than squatting.
Right, but he only did it when there was nobody on.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that was my point. My point is, if you want to, however you want to do it, but honestly, I don't see, like I said, I don't see the catcher giving a target anymore. You know, Greg Maddux could not pitch with today's catcher.
Right.
You know, there's just no way because Greg, he relied on even at 6 inches off the plate to where the catcher would set up and it would look like the catcher's catching it right in the middle, even though he was set up, 2 or 3 inches off the plate. That's where he would get a strike or get a ball, depending on how the catcher caught it. You don't see that anymore. And I think that's an art that, we wonder why pitchers are getting hurt more because everything they're throwing is max effort. Roger Clemens was on a podcast the other day I was listening to, and he was talking about today's pitchers and the injuries and everything that happened. And he said, yes, because when I first came up throwing 98 miles an hour, my pitching coach grabbed me and said, Roger, how long do you want to play? How long do you want to last? Because what I'm going to teach you is you're going to throw 94, 93, and you're going to hit your spots. And when you need that 98, you can reach back and get it.
Right.
But if you do that every pitch, you're not going to be around here very long. And Roger Clemens, whatever you believe as far as what lasted his career longer, tells you that is the reason why he was able to last as long as he did and throw the ball consistently like he was, because he didn't waste all of his bullets every single pitch trying to just go 4 or 5 innings.
Exactly.
I feel like Verlander did a lot of that early in his career too. He would start out 94, 95, and then in the 8th inning, he would work his way up to 98 once the game called for it. So I feel like you see that with the great pitchers, and that's why they're great. Whereas some of the young pitchers just want to throw 101 every single time.
Well, that's because that's what they're being taught.
Right.
From high school all the way through college and into the minor leagues. I laugh when I hear a pitcher go, well, honestly, I just heard it at the University of Georgia. There was a pitcher that pitched the game, and I had a couple kids I was recruiting from there and that played there that were good friends. And literally the kid went in and he gave up 7 runs in the first inning and 5 runs in the second inning. And he came in and the pitching coach said, well, what did you think? He goes, my spin rates were great. My velocity. I'm like, but you didn't get anybody out. Who cares what your spin rates are? If the ball's spinning and it still winds up down the middle, it's going to get hit.
Yep.
And I think that's where, like I said, some of these analytics that are so prevalent in baseball right now need to be readjusted. Pitchers need to learn to throw to the spots. Mariano Rivera had one pitch that broke a little bit more than the other one. And because he could spot that pitch every time he threw it is why he became one of the greatest relievers ever in baseball. It wasn't because he threw max effort every single time.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
And
Guys like him, Tom Glavine, same thing. I mean, guys paint the corners. Tom Glavine wasn't throwing it 100 miles per hour, but just hit your spots, hit your targets, location, and control. The two biggest things, in my opinion. And it's a shame that it's not an art that's taught anymore. It's now how live is your arm. It's not how good you could use it.
Yeah, and it's something that we stressed on this show and led to several of the pitcher injuries, which we've called the elbow epidemic here in 2024. So, it's been a tough ride and a tough conversation to cover all these young athletes who have been lost to injury. So if you're just joining us, shame on you, but thank you for joining us here. We have 140 people in the building right now on just YouTube alone. So thank you so much for joining us here with Jim Leyritz, 1996, 1999 World Series champion. You mentioned Greg Maddux just before, and we'll get into those Atlanta Braves, specifically a certain at bat that we may or not talk about. But I did want to talk about those early 90s Yankees because I was a 90s kid, but not young enough to enjoy the 90s Yankees. And one year that was called out to me was 1994, which is where the strike shortened the Major League Baseball season. And one of the things that was brought up was the fact that out in the National League, the Montreal Expos were dominating the NL. The Expos, of course, now the Washington Nationals. And if maybe at destiny reached the Expos, maybe baseball would be still played in Montreal. Whereas in the American League side of the house, it was the Yankees dominated the American League. Jim, you're part of that team. Where'd you see that team going in 1994 if the strike did not exist that year?
Yeah, when we struck in August, we thought for sure that there was no way we would lose the World Series. And we didn't mind leaving for a while because we were in first place by like 9 or 10 games. So we would have been the team representing the American League, playing, like you mentioned, against those Expos, which I'll tell you what, I don't know how that would have turned out because that team was loaded. And it's unfortunate because had we played that, you may not have lost Montreal. You know, that might have saved baseball in Montreal because that team, like I said, with Pedro, with Randy Johnson, with Dennis Martinez, with Larry Walker, Moises Alou, I mean, that Vizquel, all those guys, that team was loaded. And it would have been probably a hell of a World Series against those two teams in that year. I laugh because you mentioned that, the one thing that you remembered. I do think that would have made a big difference for both New York and for and it would have been the first time Don Mattingly ever got a chance to go to a World Series. So that would have been nice too.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't bring up the memory of today's anniversary that happened in 1990 and the Andy Hawkins no-hitter.
I was actually just going to get to that, Jim. So I recently watched, and I think Rich just watched it as well, the 1990 Bronx Zoo mini-series, the mini-doc that you were featured featured heavily in. And I got to say, I'm a little older than the rest of the crew, so I do remember the glory days of the 90s Yankees. But that 1990 story is something I had never seen, and there were some wild things that happened with that team. But the question I had for you is, as a lot of fans point to, and media and everything point to, when George Steinbrenner gets kicked out of baseball, essentially, is the turning point. Gene Michael comes in, builds the team the right way, brings new guys in, keeps some guys. But in that road, as one guy who went from 90 to 96, as I think the only guy, you obviously can correct me if I'm wrong, was there a moment, a transaction of a game that you really saw like the light at the end of the tunnel, with that team going from one of the worst teams in baseball to growing into what that 90s dynasty ended up being?
Yeah, listen, I think the biggest thing for me was, I was the first one called up from the minor leagues in 1990 when Gene Michael took over and started everything. And he called me in the office and he said, Jimmy, I know you guys have been upset down there because we've never built from within. We've always gone and signed free agents, but I have the reins right now. If you get off to a good start, it's going to open the doors for a lot more of your teammates down there. And I got off to a good start and I was playing hard. And, Dave LaPointe was talking about, we finally have young players up here playing the game like it's supposed to be played, with a lot of grit and a lot of gusto. And then all of a sudden Kevin Moss comes up and he hits, 20 home runs in the first 2 months he's up in the big leagues.
The original Shane Spencer.
Alan Mills. It just started building and building. And by the time we got to the 94 team and the strike, I think we really felt like we had something building. And then especially when Showalter took off, I think when he took over in 93, I think that was the turning point. That was, okay, here's somebody that has bled Yankee blue through the minor leagues, was a pretty good minor league player, but never got a chance because Don Mattingly was in front of him. All right. And was a student of the game, probably the smartest manager I ever played for.
Wow.
And I already had him for 3 or 4 years in the minor leagues. So to have him in the big leagues, it was a guy that I trusted in, that I could have faith in. And I think that move right there, bringing him in, getting him and Gene Michael together to build this franchise, that was a key move that really started to build that dynasty. And that, like I said, unfortunately, they don't get the credit for 96, but they're the ones that really helped build that.
Oh, Rich, you're muted.
Rich, you're on mute.
I was taking a deep breath too. I didn't want to be rude. I want to take you back to 1996 now that we're mentioning that great year. Tom just mentioned before, the last one from that 1990s team to take the championship in 1996. But to get there, we need to relive a certain moment. So if you don't mind, Jim, we're actually going to pull up said moment and let's walk through that at bat with Mark Wohlers, who was taking the mound, all-star season for Wohlers that year. Entered that season 39 saves for the Atlanta Braves. So let's go. We'll pull up the very at bat, Jim Leyritz and Mark Wohlers, and let's
now wait, before you start this, don't start it yet.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Let's go.
You got to have the story before this at bat.
All right, let's hear it.
So they pitch hit for Girardi in the top of the 7th. O'Neill strikes out. I go in to catch the bottom of the 7th. I come in the 8th inning, and I'm at the bat rack, and I only have 2 bats left because I broke 3 bats in batting practice the night before. Or that night, I'm sorry. And I only had 2 bats for game 5 when I was catching Pettit against Smoltz. And so I came down to the dugout, and I looked at Darryl Strawberry, and I said, Straw, this guy throws 100 miles an hour. I only have 2 bats left. He had a brand new case of bats right there. I said, can I borrow one of those? And he said, yeah, go ahead, take one. So I took one of his Mizunos, I put some pine tar on it, and I went to use it. I went to the stairs right before you went up to the on-deck circle, and I looked at Don Zimmer, and I said, Zim, you know I don't pay any attention in the meetings. What's this guy got? And he goes, Jimmy, he throws 100 miles an hour. Just get it ready. And so I go onto the on-deck circle. I see him throw a couple sliders. He throws a slider to Mariano Duncan, who hits a ball that should have been a double play. And I'm going, okay, this guy's got fastball slider. I got to get it ready. And sure enough, let's start the at-bat now.
All right, let's get that at-bat started. Again, Mark Wohlers on the bump. This is game 4 of the 1996 World Series, and let's get this thing going. So here we go now. So you're settling in here.
Yep, pitch one. I'm getting ready because I know he's got a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, so I'm trying to get ready. And I swing out my ass, and it looks like I'm right on it. And even the announcer, Joe Buck, says, Leyritz was right on him. And Tim McCovers went, well, not quite, but. So then all of a sudden, keep going.
So you're approaching this at bat saying, I'm not letting the fastball beat me with these first few pitches here. You're dialed into the heat, right?
Yep. And so he throws a slider for a ball. Now I think I've seen the only 2 pitches he had. I never knew the guy had a forkball. Never knew it because he doesn't usually throw it to right-handers, which thank God. All right. So then he goes with another slider right here. Same thing. Gets on the side of it, leaves it up high.
Yep.
So now I know he's coming back with fastballs, being a catcher. And I'm like, okay, dial it up because even though I was that first ball, I looked like I was right on it. The mark on the new bat was right on the label. So I'm like, I got to get the head out a little bit better. And sure enough, he comes up with another fastball. And when you hear the announcers, it's really great. Tim McCarver seems like a genius when you hear him.
Well, unfortunately, we can't get Tim McCarver up here, or else this video would come offline.
99.
So.
You're right on.
I fouled straight back. I got a little bit better swing on it. And so all of a sudden, Tim McCarver saying right here. So I think Wohlers was going to the slider too much. He just threw a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. Let's see if he can break the 100 mark right here. And sure enough, the next pitch.
A moment in history.
I think the next one is down and away. You fell off, right?
2 more pitches.
Yeah.
So this next pitch, because he thought I was right on the fastball, he comes back with another slider. And I barely get foul this one off. But now I'm saying to myself, okay, fastball in, he's coming in, because I just barely got a piece of that. He's got me leaning out over the plate.
Right.
He throws a fastball in, he gets me. So I moved about a half a step off the plate. So if he threw it in, I just took it for another ball.
So watching this back, I'm thinking after that one, you barely got a piece of it down and away. So if Rich, you want to pause it for a second. So I'm thinking in this situation at 2-2, if he buries one another inch away, that he's going to get you on it, or what you're saying, he's going to come fastball in. So from my perspective, and I see where the catcher's setting up, I think he's trying to throw this down and away, another inch away from you, and getting you to swing over the top of it. And it looks like, from my perspective, he hangs it, but I would have assumed that would have been what was going through his mind.
So what happened was, and this is what I've been told, is that after I fouled that last pitch back, you can see right here, I took about a half a step back off the plate.
Yep.
When he saw that, he realized that, okay, he can't throw a fastball in. And I opened up more of the outside of the plate. But what he didn't know is I knew I took away the inside pitch. So everything I was looking for was out over the plate. And when he threw that slider and didn't get it out there, it came right into my bat.
Yep.
So.
And now you're running around the bases here. What's going through your head here?
I said, well, all I did was funny enough, I wasn't floating around the bases. Funny enough, all I could think about was, if we don't win this game, it's going to be a footnote like the 95 walk-off against Seattle. We need to win this game in order for this to become a huge home run to change the momentum. And sure enough, we end up going extra innings and winning that game. And thank God Wade Boggs gets a walk to win that game instead of a base hit, because that hit would have been one of the biggest in history of the Yankees. Instead, it was a base on balls. So it wasn't quite as big a moment as you would have if you had a base hit.
I mean, it's safe to say, obviously, that was the momentum shift of the game. It was not only the momentum shift of the game, it was the momentum shift of the series. And arguably, it was the momentum shift of the franchise as well. It started in 1996. Yeah. And who knows, what moments would lead on to what happened in 98 and 99 and 2000 with the Yankees, eventually 2009 as well. But that was a momentum shift for a franchise right there. An unbelievable moment there, Jim.
So the funny thing was, Joe Torre invites me to his dinner once in a while to tell the story about if in 1997, when the Yankees got beat by the Cleveland Indians and Mariano Rivera gave up the home run to Sandy Alomar. Gene Michael told the story many times that George walked into his office and said, "Get rid of Mariano, fire Torre. I'm done. Okay, I'm tired of this." And sure enough, Gene Michael said to him, "George, did you forget about last year?" And George said, "Okay, I'll give him one more year." And he met Mariano and Torre. "We'll give him one more year." And that was the 98 season. And can you imagine if George makes him make that deal and get rid of Torre and get rid of Mariano, that dynasty may never happen. And we don't have any of those Derek Jeter days, Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettitte, Jorge Posada. None of those days happened. That's what the importance of that 96 World Series team, my home run, but also that team winning that World Series. That's what really was so important to the franchise of the dynasty of that late 90s.
Yeah, 100%. And again, the dynasty Yankees, one that will always go down in the history of baseball as one of the greatest franchises over a 5-year span. And it's incredible. And it all started in 96 with your moment. Jim Leyritz with us here at the Plate at Empire State of Baseball. Jim, thanks for joining us today. Of course, want to talk about a little bit of your post-playing days. You've gone on to host podcasts. You wrote your own autobiography. You're a motivational speaker. Is any elements from your playing days you take into either of the three ventures that I just mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is the motivational part of my story is never getting drafted, making it to the big leagues, having the huge moment that I had in 1996 or 90. I always say 95, 96, and 99 with the last home run of the century.
I was going to say the 99 one goes people forget it, but the 99 one is a massive home run as well.
Yeah, and then of course the ones I hit with San Diego to get us to the World Series against the Yankees in '98. That was a pretty good 4-year run for me, to say the least. But to have those, to be able to talk about those memories, but then also getting to a point in 2003 where I came back from injury. The Padres offered me $1 million contract to come back and play the 2003 season. And I had just gotten full custody of my kids, my 3 boys, because my ex-wife had some drug problems. And the judge in Florida told me if I went back to play baseball, that I would lose custody of my kids. And I prayed on it. My dad helped me. And I decided that there was no way that I could possibly leave a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, 9-year-old behind and think about even playing baseball and leaving them that atmosphere. And I decided to give up the game of baseball and come home. And the book called Catching Heat that I wrote was originally called The King and Dad. And it was all about leaving the game of baseball and coming home, getting rid of the nickname, the King of New York, to become home and be the best teammate of all, and that was Dad. And in 2007, that book was supposed to come out from HarperCollins. It was going to come out in 2008 in June as a Father's Day book, all about leaving the game, about Father's Day, and my dad not making sacrifices or making sacrifices for our family, so we didn't have to move and get uprooted for his job. And it was kind of supposed to be a Father's Day book in June of that year. And then I had the accident in 2007 at the end of that year. And I spent 3 years waiting to go to trial to be able to prove that I was hit by a drunk driver myself, even though I should not have been drinking and driving, that I was hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. And it took 3 years. But during that 3 years, all of the things that I went through, all the things the state of Florida put me through, the faith and the perseverance that I showed during that time, a woman heard me speaking about it, and she said, "Do you ever think about writing a book?" And I said, "Well, I already have 108 pages." And she said, "I want you to write 3 more chapters about everything you've gone through these last 3 years leading up to your trial. And just be honest and just put it out there." And I wrote 3 more chapters with Doug Lyons and Jeffrey Lyons, the movie critic. And Doug Lyons said, "You know what, Jimmy? We can't use The King and Dad because that was already copyrighted. But we renamed the book Catching Heat because I caught a lot of heat as a catcher, but I also caught a lot of heat in the courtroom." And what you asked me before, my playing days in New York, the media, the pressures, everything that I went through really helped me fight and battle during that 3 years of what the media was saying about me. Like, they convicted me within 6 days after the accident. And I publicly said, "Trust me, when this is over with, I won't see a day in jail because I didn't cause this accident." For that finally to come to light 3 years later, it kind of lost its luster. And most people to this day don't even know that that's really what happened. But that was part of my playing days, part of being in New York, really gave me the faith and the fortitude to fight that. And my speaking and my motivational speaking also teaches kids that, hey, listen, you can have stardom. You can one day be at the top of the top, but one bad decision could change everything.
Yep.
And I'm telling you guys, it was 2007 was the accident. I'm in 2024. To this day, it still hasn't left some of the things that people don't know about what really happened in that case. It still rears its head once in a while. But I know in my heart and the faith that I have through everything that I believe in, I know that speaking to kids, especially the college level kids, for the athletes, not only the importance of working hard and staying true, but also not making decisions to drink and drive, not make decisions to make a bad choice that could ruin everything that you ever worked for. I think is a very powerful motivation speaking that I can do for a lot of kids.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I have to say, I give you so much respect for making that decision. I mean, on one hand, so tough to leave your career, especially all the big moments, but ultimately family comes first. And as hard as the decision it might have been, at the same time, afterwards, it seems like common sense. It's the move you have to do, family first. And a lot of people in the chat too, calling out, how much they respect that. So I'm not alone. I know everyone here totally respects that decision you made. Have to ask too, from your standpoint, having been a player, having been a father, in the game of baseball, what would be your advice to parents whose kids have a dream of pursuing baseball long term, whether it's still at the little league level or going up through the middle school, high school years into college? What's the biggest piece of advice you can give to parents? Because I know as much pressure, obviously, there's on the kids, there is from the parent standpoint as well.
I think just the ability to read your children. I had a brother that was a better athlete than I could ever think about being, more athletic in every way than I could ever be. But I had a father, too, that was a cross between Woody Hayes and Bobby Knight. He was a hardcore, and you guys might be too young to know those guys, but those two guys were hardcore coaches. And my dad was that way. But I watched, my brother was 4 years older than me, and I watched how my brother reacted, and he did not want that kind of motivation. He didn't want that kind of pressure. He didn't excel that way. And it really kind of turned him off to sports, how hard my dad was on him. And when my dad finally focused his shift to me, he said to me, Jimmy, is this what you want? Because I'm not going to push you like I did your brother. I don't want to hurt you like I hurt him. Is this what you want? Because if it is, I will help you get there. And you know what? I can't tell you guys how many high school parents told my dad, you're going to ruin him. You're going to ruin this kid. He's not going to ever turn out to be anything. He's going to do this because of what happened to my brother. But they didn't realize that actually motivated me, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear not 2 for 4. I wanted to hear, why didn't I go 3 for 4? When I scored 20 points in a high school basketball game, why didn't I score 30? That motivated me, and my dad knew that. And it really prepared me to play for George Steinbrenner and to play in New York. And I think that's why I thrived in that atmosphere, because I always tell people the story, the difference between playing in San Diego and playing in New York. When I went 0 for 4 in San Diego, they're like, oh, Jimmy, go get him tomorrow. You're okay. You'll get him. And I'm like, no. I go 0 for 4 in New York. I want to hear Leyritz. You suck, Leyritz. What are you doing? You don't deserve this contract. I want that kind of motivation. And I really thrived on that. And that's why I never, ever wanted to leave New York, except that I wanted a chance to play every day. But when I got the opportunity in 99 and 2000 to come back, I wanted to retire as a Yankee. And my only disappointment, guys, to this day is being traded because Chuck Knobloch couldn't throw a ball to first base. I got traded to the Dodgers for Jose Vizcaíno, and I missed the 2000 Subway Series. And maybe having 4 more years as a Yankee, that is my only regret. That is what happened to me. So
good thing that wasn't a trick of the trade that we led with that show before we got you on. That would have been a little awkward. But
I could just remember hearing my dad yell at Chuck Knobloch. My dad hated Chuck Knobloch. He hated him. So did
Keith Olbermann's mom.
Let me ask you this, Jim, before Rich gets his final in. There are a lot of young catchers right now. We got Yankees have Austin Wells, who they called up last year. They got you got Aldi Rushman in the same division. You got Francisco Alvarez across town with the Mets. You look at these young catchers across baseball. Which one reminds you? Maybe it's not any of those guys. Which one reminds you most of yourself? A, and B. What catcher do you think has the brightest, future, or shows you something different that you think is really going to make that individual special over a bunch of other catchers that haven't been around for a while? I mean, Molina and Posey have retired, so we've kind of seen that gap. of that top tier catching talent in the last few years.
Yeah, it's interesting because again we're talking about difference in eras.
Mm-hmm.
When I was hitting 220 or 230 in like maybe end of May, beginning of June, I didn't have a job.
Right.
I don't care how good a catcher I was. I didn't have a job. It was one of the things that I don't see. I like Austin Wells. I wish he was hitting a little bit better because then I would say I would compare him to me a little bit as a left-handed hitter. A good glove, but not great. But he could hit. And that was his MO to come up with. Hopefully he'll get to that point. But the fact that he could play other positions too. He can play a little first base. He can play a corner outfield if necessary, just to get his bat in the lineup if he starts hitting. For me, I think we lost the utility type player catcher that we had in the 90s. A guy that could hit,
right,
but a guy that also could catch, but also play other positions. That was where, that's where I lasted 11 years because that was an anomaly back then. And it started becoming more norm in the 2000s that guys play different positions. But I always tell young kids, you were asking me before, if you can catch. But if you can learn to play other positions, don't be afraid either. Because as long as you learn the catching and you can always go back to it, playing other positions will be valuable. And then all you got to do is hit. If you hit, they'll find a place for you.
Yep. So hear that, Dad?
Austin Wells would be the guy.
Dad, you chose the right position for me. You just chose the wrong family member with the stick. That's I just messaged straight to my dad, who may be a catcher 20 years ago. But no, good stuff there. Jim, I'm just gonna wrap with this last question. And thank you for your time. By the way, this has been amazing. My apologies on the mishap with the link earlier, but at least we got that all sorted out. But it is what it is. But anyway, this event popped into by Instagram, and I wanted to call it out because Jim Leyritz is going to be a part of the Legends of Baseball cruise, which is going to be from December 7th to the 14th. Jim, any further details do you have on this? And are there any extra tickets for me to crash?
Well, I will say this: they paid me to wear that shirt.
My first question was going to be about that shirt because that shirt.
We wanted to give a tropical feel.
Yeah,
we wanted to make sure. Now, this company, Celebrity Cruises and Legends of Baseball, the cruise, they had their first one last year, and it went really, really well. So they asked me this year to come on it, and because I had a little bit of a social media following and a social media team, I told them I would put together a little bit more than just a tweet here, a tweet there, and I would, try to give them and a guy that named Chris Gannum, who does all my social media. He says, you know what, I can put together some kind of cool things that maybe we can draw more people, to go on this cruise. And hopefully some of these people see this and want to take a cruise. But yeah, we have like 10 or 12 guys going on the cruise. And it's going to be from December 7th to the 14th. And it is in the Bahamas. And it's 7 days. We usually spend 2 or 3 hours a day with the people doing autograph signings, Q&As, meet and greets, all these different types of things. We actually plan a wiffle ball game on the island to go out on the beach and play wiffle ball. So it's a pretty neat thing if you're a Yankee fan that you might want to be part of this.
I was going to say, looking at some of the other people on here, it's also an ESB alumni cruise because Homer Bush is also going to be there. So, my God, it looks like it's just it's an ESB reunion going on there.
There you go.
Love it.
Yes,
love
it should be a good time.
Fantastic. Well, again, those details are laid out on Jim's Instagram. To go give him a follow at @TheRealJLeyritz on Instagram or on X too. If you are interested in being a part of the 7-day cruise to the Bahamas, December 7th to the 14th, with the Apex and the Legends of Baseball cruise. And if I can get over my seasickness, I think I can make it out in December. Certainly.
Get some Dramamine,
Jim, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. And this will not be the last time you're here in Empire State of Baseball, I hope.
Anytime, guys. I always tell people, I had a TV and radio career before the accident. I'm hoping to get back there one of these days because I got the stories. and I enjoy the game, and I enjoy talking about it. So I appreciate you guys giving me the time. And yeah, we'll do this again. Hopefully, we can do a pre-playoff World Series
That'd be great.
show together and talk about what's coming up.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a plan. All righty, Jim. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, guys. Have a good one. God bless you.
Take care. God bless. Jim Leyritz, ladies and gentlemen. What
That was
an interview.
Great interview.
Goodness.
Great interview,
and-
especially too. Gotta say, I loved it from the catcher perspective too, because you could really get into so much detail. Even talking about the pitching behind the plate, being at bat. Phenomenal interview. Definitely shout out to Jim there for going through detail of everything tonight.
And I'm sorry, I was just grinning through from ear to ear when he was doing the breakdown of his at bat. I mean, that was some cool stuff. But hey, everybody out in the comments, thank you so much. I trust me when I tell you, I was reading all your comments for Jim, and it was nothing but fantastic stuff. I wish I was able to get a little bit more of the questions out there. But as Jim mentioned, there will be a next time eventually, and hopefully we'll have